All right, so let's look at chapter 14. Chapter 14 deals with the lymphatic system. So let's first look at the functions of the lymphatic system. One is that it defends against infections. Next is that it transports excess fluid away from interstitial tissues back to the bloodstream. All right, so our lymphatic system is another vesseled system. All right, and so when we get into these small capillaries, we have some lymphatic capillaries associated with this. All right, so I didn't talk about this last chapter, but what happens here is when we get into our blood capillaries is now here the hydrostatic pressure is very, very high. And that's going to force water and small dissolved substances into the interstitial tissues, so between the cells. All right? And so that fluid can accumulate there, and so that's why we have these lymphatic capillaries in here, and those are going to absorb that excess fluid in there. All right? And so by absorbing that excess fluid, that fluid will eventually, and I know it's hard to tell, but eventually return to venous circulation. All right? So into our veins, either our right or left subclavian veins. All right, the last thing it does is that it absorbs excess fluid, so it absorbs digestive fats from the small intestine. And we'll talk about that more when you get into the digestive system. Oh, this is elephantitis. Elephantitis is where these parasitic worms block up the lymphatic vessels. And by blocking up the lymphatic vessels, they prevent this fluid from leaving these tissues. And so you get a large amount of edema, so tissue swelling because of that. So you can get these parasites by walking around barefoot outside. So don't walk around barefoot outside in Southeast Asia because that's where this can occur. All right, so let's look at lymphatic structures. So one is just lymph, the fluid. That's what lymph means, fluid. Lymph is similar to blood plasma, except it lacks those plasma proteins. All right. So next are lymph nodes. So lymph nodes is a mass of lymphoid tissue located along the course of a lymphatic vessel. So this is showing a blow-up of a lymph node here. All right. And these lymph nodes contain a large number of lymphocytes and macrophages. So if we go back to this picture here, each one of these little swellings that you see are lymph nodes. I like to think of these as military forts because our white blood cells are our defensive cells, and those things house a lot of our white blood cells. Now, these are showing tonsils. Tonsils are really unencapsulated lymph nodes, so lymphatic tissue. These guys are kind of designed for infection, so this is going to help our immune response later on in life. All right, so next is a thymus gland. So this is the thymus here. So it's this bilobe structure found above our heart there. So what the thymus gland is going to make is it's going to make T lymphocytes. All right, now T lymphocytes are some of our immune cells. And so what we see with the thymus gland is here's the thymus gland in a newborn. Here it is in an adult. The thymus gland is much larger in children than it is in an adult, and that's because everything that a newborn is going to encounter is going to be brand new, and they have to develop an immunity to it. The older that we get, the less immune, the less new stuff that we encounter, so, we don't need to have it to be as large anymore, all right? Next is the spleen. So this is showing where the spleen is. So here's the spleen. This is our largest lymphatic organ. It essentially has two parts to it. We have red pulp and we have white pulp. So the white pulp is basically lymphatic tissue in there. And then the red pulp, that's one of these areas that we're going to remove damaged red blood cells from the blood. Okay, so let's look at defense. All right, so that's what we're going to talk about the rest of the chapter. So what we're defending against are pathogens. And a pathogen is a disease-causing agent. So that's a virus, bacteria, fungi, or protozoan. And what they're trying to cause is an infection. And that's the invasion and multiplication of microorganisms in the body. All right, so let's look at non-specific defenses. These are general defenses that protect against many types of pathogen. All right, and so the first one is really not a defense. It's called species resistance. And so this is a natural ability of one type of organism to resist infection by a microorganism that causes a disease in another type of organism. And this all has to do with specificity, right? So over time, pathogens become specific to a particular type of organism. Not all the time, but a lot of times they can, right? So, you know, if you have something that just affects dogs, right, you know, then that's a disease that we're not going to get. Now, there are many diseases that humans have that other things don't get, right? So measles is one of those, mumps is another one, gonorrhea is another one, syphilis is another one. Although elephants can get syphilis, but it's a different kind of syphilis. There's no human-elephant transmission of syphilis. Oh, here's another one. Head lice is a species that is only pathogenic to humans, right? So here's the thing. Like, if we all got rid of the habitat for those lice, meaning your hair, right, then we could get rid of, so if we all got rid of our hair for about 6 months, we get rid of the habitat for those lice, we can all get rid of head lice, you know, in a 6-month period of time. I think this is a great plan. I think we should all do this. I've actually started this program. I'm just waiting for the rest of you to catch up with me. Next are mechanical barriers. So mechanical barriers are going to prevent entry of infectious agents. This is essentially our first line of defense. So this is our skin and also our mucous membranes. Now, that's not to say that skin and mucous membranes can't be attacked, because they can, but that's trying to prevent those pathogens from getting into us. After this, we're in our second line of defense. So one is, that second line of defense is our chemical barriers. So these are chemicals that are going to break down infectious agents. So these are such things as digestive enzymes, hydrochloric acid, in our saliva and our tears is lysozyme, which is an antibacterial agent. All right. So next, another thing that we can do is phagocytosis. And this is engulfing of large particles or other cells. And we see that here. So if this is a bacterium, this phagocytic cell engulfs it, a lysosome fuses with it, and it kills that microorganism. And this is done by monocytes and macrophages and neutrophils. And that's what we see on this next page. There's a neutrophil engulfing a bacterium there. Next is a fever. A fever is an elevation of body temperature above normal, all right? So what this does for us is it makes those phagocytic cells move more quickly so they can get to those infected areas, all right? It also causes our liver and spleen to sequester or take up iron and zinc. And iron and zinc are necessary for microbial growth, whether it's a bacteria or a virus or a fungus. So low-grade fevers are really good for us in that they are showing that we're fighting off a pathogen here. High fevers, you know, you get into 104, 105, 106 degree temperatures. That can be into that life-threatening process. All right. Next is inflammation, and this is a tissue's response to stress. And this is characterized by dilation of blood vessels. So by dilation of blood vessels, that's going to bring more blood to that area, which is going to bring more white blood cells to that area. So this also is going to cause the accumulation of fluid into that area, and that essentially walls that area off, and so it's going to try to help prevent that infection from spreading to other areas. It looks red because of all the blood that's in the area, and so, you know, by walling it off, I already mentioned that, prevents that infection from spreading. One of the things that we can see in an area that is inflamed is pus that can occur. So what pus is that it is bacteria, white blood cells, and damaged tissues. All right. One of the things I didn't mention about neutrophils is neutrophils are essentially kind of suicide bombers here. In that once they do one phagocytic event, they're going to release their lysozymes into that area to kill off other bacteria. That's also going to damage some of our tissue, but that's fine. We can repair that after the fact. What we're trying to do is get rid of that bacteria. And so that's what creates that pus that accumulates there.